Ready?
Thank you.
Okay, we will call to order the Roseville Board of Commissioners Joint Work Session and Planning Board, April 18th, 2023. Thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight. We're starting, it's a little early at 6 than our normal time, but appreciate it. Got 4 items, actually 3 items on the agenda, so we'll kind of get started. I do want to welcome the Planning Board. I see at least a couple of you out there. Is it any more Planning Board members?
Not in the room right now.
Okay, that's all I see too. So, welcome, guys, and we will do it. Being that this is a joint session, we will do it a little bit out of kind of norm tonight. If either one of you or any other new Planning Board members come and have a question, you know, we'll entertain your questions from the floor. If you want to do that, if you want to come sit closer, if you got a lot of questions, you know, you're welcome to do that too, because this is supposed to be intended like a joint work session. So thank y'all for coming. So the first item we have is the budget presentation. Before I do that, is any comments from the staff or the board before we get started? Everybody ready to go?
Yes, sir.
All right, sound like everybody's ready to go. So you the first one, Amy, if you want to come up. You and Kelly for the budget presentation.
Ready?
We're all ready. Yep.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Board. I'll start off and turn it over to Amy. In front of you, it's that time of year, and I am delivering tonight, per statute, the manager's recommended budget for fiscal year 2023-24. This budget encompasses most everything we talked about a month ago. I believe we had a retreat session for about 5 hours next door, in which we allowed department heads to talk to you and talk about their ideas, and you gave some good feedback, and we'll go through that feedback tonight. But this is delivery of the budget. It sets forth the process of the budget adoption, and you'll hear Amy when she wraps up that you must adopt this budget by July 1. So with that in mind, I just want to kind of touch on a couple things. The first part is really my primary responsibility, and that is the budget message. And you'll see, as always, I have attempted through the budget message to summarize to the best of my capability, highlights and such of the budget. And when you have a chance, take a moment to read that. But really, it talks about that theme that we introduced at the retreat about the bridge. And as Amy and I, we try every time, our first goal when we sit down and talk about the budget when we're going through it is, what is kind of this year looking like? And we think it is the bridge to the future. You know, we've been kind of approaching it, and now we're moving into it, and we're really moving into what this community is going to become in the long run, which is long term, which is a actively engaged suburb of Raleigh, growing, dynamic. And now we are starting to look at all those pieces that are things that we've talked about over time coming towards us, and we're going to be addressing those over the next 5 to 10 years. And this bridge budget really gets us there and starts moving there. And so there's a lot of things that are exciting by that, and there's also challenges, obviously. As always, we always have that challenges about how we fund this. And as we've talked about in the past, our funding mechanism is largely based upon the residential property tax. And this budget continues that. But the good news is we're starting to see some development coming forward, and those commercial developments are going to come on. But that lag, that bridge, is about 2 to 3 or 4 years before they actually come on and start showing that revenue. And so that traditional source we've relied upon, that traditional mix we've relied upon for the past few years, is going to still be intact in this budget and over the next couple, 3 years. But we also know that we need to not just stay and not be in motion. So this budget really does incorporate and starts bringing forth a better, a bigger level of service. It includes more employees, as you hear from Amy, and preparing for that future. So that's some of the theme within the budget. But most importantly, how do we get there, and what are the priorities of the budget? And as I talked about in our opening at our budget retreat, it really does talk about the three, we think it talks about these three top priorities. It talks about how we invest in our people, our employees who make up the base of this organization, and how we do our business. The investment in our resources for people are the emphasis of this budget. It also emphasizes the need to complete projects. So we took on a lot over the last couple of years, and we're still finishing those off. This year's capital is a little bit less because we're trying to finish those big ones that we have, including the Main Street project and the building, the Public Works building. But we're doing some good capital work, but really what we're going to be spending a good part of the latter part of this year, as you know, is how are we going to put together this capital budget, including funding the farm, including funding what comes out of your preferred site plan for the town campus and the facilities there. We're going to really engage on that even further. It's been about a year and a half since we had that conversation with our finance advisor. And I think as we bring forward the town campus, we're going to really start to see the realities of those buildings and start to talk about real costs. And we're going to have some good conversations, and we have to make some important decisions, I think, on how we're going to finance those. And we're going to kind of push that until we have that town campus design done, and then really engage later on this summer and the rest of the year on that. But we want to make sure this budget gives you a realistic capital projects that we can get done this year. So there are capital projects to review again with you, but they're not as many and as much as maybe the last couple of years. And then really what we're really starting to continue to focus on is building our core services in police, public works, finance, supporting the system, the organization, and those are the building the additional employees that we were proposing. So those are the three kind of priorities you'll see, is investing in people, completing the projects, the capital projects that we want to get accomplished, and then also really start building on those core services. So with that, most importantly, I want to continue to bring to your attention that without Amy and without the department head and without the organization to do this work and this budget, we wouldn't be here today because there's a lot of work put forth in that. So I want to thank in advance the staff that's worked on this. But Amy's going to go through it now and spend a little bit more time on it, and then be open for your questions. You'll really have the opportunity to hear from the public in 2 weeks at your scheduled public hearing. So Amy, go for it.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. So we always like to start. What is all that? I don't know what that is. That used to be a logo. Interesting. Okay. Well, we always like to start with the strategic plan. I think that's supposed to say vision.
It is. Blurry, though.
It is a little odd. I guess that font is not on this computer. Okay, so we like to start with the strategic plan. This was revised about a year ago by you all to make sure that we are achieving what we want to as a community. So the vision you had set forth was one about genuine community. You set 4 key focus areas that are shown here and 16 goals. So as we go through this presentation tonight, you will see little green circles throughout, and that's making those connections to the strategic plan. Also, in your document is full of these little green circles, again, making those connections as we go through everything with this proposed budget. Now, as we talk tonight, I am going to invite you, if you wish, to follow along in the book. I will try to remember to note page numbers. If you get lost, let me know, because I'm probably going to forget a few. All right, so overall, budget history. So this is page 21 of your document, if you want to follow along. This is sort of the 30,000-foot view of the budget. You'll notice in the book there's a lot of other funds listed there. We do not actually actively budget those funds. They are more passive funds. But the two that we do actively budget are the general fund and the capital projects fund. So your general fund basically contains all of your operating departments, and that budget is adopted with an annual budget ordinance. So those budget appropriations are good through the end of the fiscal year, or June 30th. In this case, this would be June 30th of 2024. The other fund, the capital projects fund, typically has your longer-term, multi-year capital projects. And so those budgets are adopted using what's called a capital project ordinance. And in that case, the budget authorization lasts until the project is complete. So when you look here, comparing last year, or the current year, 22-23, to this proposed budget, 23-24, you see the general fund does go up slightly. It is about a 17% increase from one year to the other. Now, part of that gets skewed a little bit with some fund balance appropriation for capital projects. And then you see a significant difference in the capital projects fund. Last year, 11 million, this year, just over 1 million. Again, that fund is very project-driven, so last year we budgeted part of that Main Street project in there, so that's why it had that nice big jump up last year, and it's back down about where it typically has been. All right, so let's take a little bit look at the general fund more in detail. This is page 24 of your book. This slide shows the sources of your revenues. As the manager mentioned earlier, the largest source of revenue for the town is ad valorem property taxes. Wake County is estimating a 4.9% growth in the property tax base for this budget year. They do have over 99% collection rate, so they're doing an excellent job for you in terms of collecting that property tax from the parcels in town. Your second largest source of revenue is in that taxes and licenses category. It's not all of it, but most of it is your sales tax revenue. And we are projecting 4% growth in that revenue. It is a conservative number given economic uncertainty over the next 12 to 18 months. On the expenditure side of the general fund, it's a very busy pie chart, but it does still give you an idea of where tax dollars are going in this proposed budget. By far, public safety takes up the largest chunk of the expenditure side, with police and fire combined accounting for 35% of your expenditures in this budget. The next largest area is combined public works, solid waste. They're broken out separately here, but we do sort of think about those together. That is an area, again, it's your second largest area. We're anticipating that growing in the coming years. As we make a more significant investment in our capital infrastructure here in town, I think we're gonna see that area taking over a greater portion of our operating budget in the coming years.
Those two percentages, is it basically the solid waste contracted out
Yes, sir.
and the public works is mostly in-house?
Yes, sir.
That's a pretty good split.
Yeah, in fact, I believe everything in that solid waste category is purely the contracted side.
You realize that was more than our in-house? No, really it is.
It is a significant expenditure. Okay, going back and spending a little bit more detail in the revenues, this proposed budget does maintain the current tax rate, 46 cents for every $100 of valuation, so no changes there. As the manager mentions in his transmittal letter, there are two proposed fee increases. One, the motor vehicle fee. Oh, and you can see this on page 25. Yep, up there at the top is the property tax. You can see that Rollsville is about in the middle of Wake County property taxes as of last year's adopted budgets. And then the motor vehicle fee, state statutes permit you to apply a fee of up to $30 per vehicle per year. Rollsville is currently at $20, and this budget proposed raising that to $30 per vehicle. Residents pay that fee when they renew their license plates. And as you can see, most units in Wake County are already at that $30 per month, per vehicle. The other fee that's proposed to increase in this budget is the solid waste fee. It's currently $22 per month and being proposed to raise to $25 per month. That fee has not increased in over 10 years. Despite, as the mayor mentioned, that growing category of the solid waste contractor costs, we have seen some pretty significant increases in that area over the last probably 4 to 5 years. We have been able to absorb that increased cost from the contractors by reducing our overhead and administrative costs by some of the decisions that y'all have made. We are now at that point where we're not able to recover those direct costs, and so proposing to raise that to $25 per month. Finally, the schedule of fees. Nothing major there. Sometimes we do bring some things to you, but this year there are a few technical amendments to some of the wording in that schedule of fees. The planning department has taken a look at that to make sure that the wording matches the new LDO. But in terms of any rate changes, there is nothing proposed at this time. All right. Not really a revenue, we normally think, but fund balance is also important to look at. This is on page 32. Goes into a little bit of detail about the fund balance because this proposed budget does use just over $900,000 of fund balance. So if you look at this chart before you, the light blue bar at the bottom is your unassigned fund balance. The next one just above there, it's a little bit darker blue, is the capital savings. So you can see about 4 or 5 years ago, we began setting aside a few pennies of the tax rate to go into a special savings to use for future capital investments, new buildings, new facilities.
What page is that?
Oh, I'm sorry, that is page 30, oh gosh, I can't read it, it's so small, 32.
There's not a chart, though.
There's no chart?
There's no chart, it's all text.
Okay.
Yeah. So capital savings, we're anticipating that after this proposed budget, the end of that fiscal year, I believe it is just over 1.8 million. Yes, 1.8 million. So that's an important part of your CIP model that you put together last year to have that long-term 5-year capital plan. And then finally, the very dark bar at the top, and those, particularly just in those last 2 years, is the ARPA-created fund balance. So the town has claimed all of its ARPA funding from the federal government. That money is now free and clear of all federal regulations. We used that under the ARPA program to replace lost revenue. And so it is free of federal restrictions, but we are continuing to account for it separately, just so that we can track and explain how that funding has been used for the benefit of the community. So you can see that's added for the end of this fiscal year, and then we're proposing to use a good part of that in this year. So as you will see outlined on page 32, there are 4 main things proposed for the use of fund balance. First is $300,000 of that ARPA-created funding to go towards the Granite Falls Greenway project, or Granite Acres Greenway. Another $90,000 of ARPA-created fund balance to go towards creating an affordable housing plan. We've got $350,000 of unassigned balance slotted for the Redford Place Park lights replacement, the second portion of that. We've already replaced one. Talking about replacing the other 2. And then finally, there's $91,000 and just a few other very small one-time projects. Okay, so now, yes.
The affordable housing plan, fund balance, that's new, I think. Did that have any balance at all before you could put the 90 in?
For the,
so.
I'm sorry,
You designated $90,000
of the,
ARPA money for fund balance affordable housing plan.
that's
Now,
correct.
that's a new plan, I think.
That's correct. That is a plan that does not exist today.
So it's no funds at all. 'Cause I was thinking
No, sir.
I was thinking that maybe we approved at least one project where there was some donate funds to affordable housing, but that's not true.
I don't remember that.
I can't
Who's
recall
going to do
anything.
that?
I forgot. I know we talked about it, but maybe
But this is on behalf of the town, putting this money aside for that project that we talked about 2 months ago, I think.
but we do get a dedication from a development, something that will go in this fund here.
Well, I haven't been part of the conversations. This
That's
is
like
part of
research.
an affordable housing plan to have a consultant come in to provide some
Research.
advice
So we still
on.
don't have a fund.
No, sir.
'Cause I know sometimes, like Wake Forest has a
Right,
fund that they
right.
put 1% in.
That's
per
right.
year, or 1 penny
Yeah.
per year.
Yeah, no,
This
this
is not a fund.
this is for a paper plan.
Okay. I was just thinking all these were funds here, but that one is different.
Right, yeah. Okay.
I guess eventually it will lead to something like that once we get the information back from the consultants, hopefully.
Okay, and digging in a little bit more now on the expenditure side, still in the general fund, again, operations. This is the general government. I've sort of grouped together several different departments here. And by the way, I'm on page 20 now for the next several slides, the budget at a glance. That's a pretty good summary of everything, all the main items within this proposed budget. So we're proposing the communications specialist position going full-time. It will be time for your every 2-year strategic plan update. Additional funding for a new accountant position. And then HR has some funding in there to start a new program focused on employee safety. In development services, this is typically planning, economic development type activities. This budget includes 2 Planner 2 positions. So this is a little bit different than what we talked about at our last budget work session. 2 Planner 2 positions, one would come in July or be available to fill in July. The other we're proposing to delay filling until January, halfway through the budget year, so that we can assess the conditions in the marketplace and see how the department is and at what point we're ready to implement that position. There is additional funding in here for comprehensive land use plan update. There is funding in this current year, 22-23, and then this proposed budget is proposing some additional funds for that so that we can go ahead and move ahead with the update. Here's that affordable housing plan. It's in the planning department budget, and they are also looking at development review software.
So it's development what?
Development review software. All right, and then public safety. What you'll see in this budget is a lot of actions to implement that organizational study that you heard about a few weeks ago from Certus. This includes, excuse me, so this budget includes an executive analyst position. This is a civilian position to assist police executive personnel with some administrative functions. The town is anticipating applying for 2 new police officer positions through the federal COPS grant program. And then finally, there are several items of equipment in here. Drone, last year they had their body camera replacements. This year, we're looking at the in-car camera replacements. And then continuing their vehicle replacement, just like the photograph of their new vehicle there in the slide. All right, in Public Works, more personnel. We're looking forward to opening that facility later this calendar year. This budget includes an operations coordinator position to help administer some of the more administrative type functions within Public Works. A maintenance worker that is currently half-time to increase that to a full-time position, and then some small equipment as well. In Parks and Recreation, a new half-time position for administrative support specialist to help, again, with some administrative support in that department. Additional funding for community events like the 4th of July. some funding to begin, put in place the first station for the outdoor museum that was in their Parks and Rec master plan. And then finally, funds to install an automatic gate at Millbridge Nature Park. Oh, I don't know why that came later. Okay. And then overall, employee pay and benefits. So on the employee pay side, what this budget includes is a 5% market adjustment or COLA for all employees, which would be effective on July 1. I believe from what we've heard, that seems to be pretty comparable to what is being proposed elsewhere in Wake County this year. So we feel like that's going to be adequate to keep up with the local market. For performance pay or merit pay, we're proposing an up to $1,500 bonus or incentive for each employee that would be available on their anniversary date. This budget also proposes reclassifying all sworn law enforcement officer positions by 1 pay grade or 5%. We did, based on last year's budget process, it does appear that some other units went ahead and got pretty aggressive out there with law enforcement positions, and so we're recommending this to maintain competitiveness in that particular area over this next year.
Is that here? Is it in there?
I added it on the slide later, so
'cause I don't
it's
see it
probably
on
not
here
on your
either.
printed side, no.
Okay, I don't see it on here.
Yes. And then finally, employee benefit side, continued funding of the pension plan. I know we talked about that at the work session. It's a chart that just keeps going up on what the town's cost is to keep funding the pension plan for employees. But on the good news, only a 2.5% increase in the health insurance premiums this year. So
Amy, did you cover economic development with planning, or did I miss it? I didn't look up at the slide.
yeah, that's sort of together in that development services. So yeah, it's pretty much a status quo there. Continued work on the Downtown Development Association and supporting that creation, as well as support for the Chamber of Commerce. Okay, so we talked about a lot of personnel. So here's just another slide to summarize that for you. All of these positions equate to about 6.5 equivalent people. This is page 2627 in your book, if you wanted to follow along there. This is where we have an organization chart as well as some detailed history of the different personnels that we've had. Okay, so that is the operating budget. Just one thing I did want to reiterate before as we transition over to capital, and that is I mentioned about the capital savings, and this budget does continue that 3.5 cents worth of property tax going towards that capital savings program. Now we're going to have you jump way ahead in your budget to page 61. This is a chart that shows all of your current capital project ordinances. Okay, so I remember I mentioned when we budget the capital fund, we budget that using the capital project ordinance. So page 61 outlines for you all of the current ordinances that are out there and funded. So currently, we have 7 projects that are underway and actively worked by staff. So this goes back to what the manager mentioned, his second priority to get these completed and come to some resolution and closure on these projects. Just one thing I did want to note on that project ordinances is that sometime between now and the end of the fiscal year, we'll probably want to do a little bit of work to clean up some of these. Some of them I think need to be combined into some others. Some may be pulled back. There's some things here about cobblestone. We may want to take another look at those and kind of clean up some of this appropriations. Okay, I mentioned earlier the CIP model. This is that 5-year CIP and it's also on page 66. Just here to mention to you, we did not make any changes for this proposed budget to this 5-year model because, as the manager mentioned, we want to do the update work on this as we work through this with ADW architects, as well as bringing Davenport advisors back in for the financial side. But we have added a few small projects for the FY '23-24 year, so we'll run through those. First one is your town hall HVAC. The HVAC units that are here now are original to the construction from 2008. We have already had to replace one. They are soon going to be a problem. And we expect multiple to go out at one time. So we want to have, it's probably going to take a couple of years to work this out. We've got a first appropriation of $80,000. We plan on using that to address the most high priority units.
I have a question. So was that a million that I saw? No, 80, 140? These are all brand new or just repairs?
These are replacement units.
Oh, replacement, oh, replacement.
Yes.
Okay.
And some duct work that's needed to, we have a couple hot spots and cold spots that haven't originally weren't created equally with the duct work, and so they need to be addressed.
Lack of insulation in the exterior walls and big windows in the front create a lot of fluctuating temperatures in this building,
Are those windows tinted, by the way?
inside and out. Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, also, now it's not in this budget. We're expecting this to be a mid-year ordinance that we'll bring to you, which is the town campus design for the infrastructure. But we don't want to lose sight of that. We just are not quite ready with any numbers for that yet. As I mentioned earlier, what is included is $300,000 for the Granite Acres Greenway. We have included $130,000 for Millbridge Park amphitheater renovations. A lot of this was stimulated through the ADA transition plan. You can tell from this photograph, it is not an easily accessible structure for those with physical limitations. So this would redo the seating area as well as the stage.
Will it provide more seating?
It'll make it more accessible and different type of seating. It's gonna be more of a stone seating type of, and then more grass,
But not more seating?
not this type of bench seating.
No. Okay.
It should create more space for people to bring theirs, because that's what gets used more. These, like Saturday night's concert, we had about 150 people there, and that was 20 people were sitting in there on those. Everybody else brings their own or sits in grass.
Okay.
This proposed budget also includes, mentioned earlier, Redford Place Park lights replacement to finish out the replacement of all 3 fields. All right, additional items. Couple things that I wanted to mention and just bring to your attention, which is pages 84 and 85 in your
Amy.
document.
Let me stop you for just a moment, because
Sure.
I'm getting confused. When I look at page 66 and how it relates to page 61, are all of those projects intended to be included on 66 or no?
60.
I see some of them, but I don't, and maybe they're broken out.
Yeah, so 61 is sort of looking to the past, things
Okay.
that we've already appropriated, whereas the 5-year model on page 66 is looking forward.
So there's none on here that are continued that should be on 66? I feel like they're not done yet, right?
For the most part, yeah, there's some overlap. What would be a good example? Like the Rogers Willoughby project, which is about almost in
Right.
the middle of page 61, right? We've appropriated money in the past. It's still on the 5-year model, but as you'll see, it's under FY '22-23, right, which was last year. We have not updated the model
Okay,
because we're working on that this summer.
I got you. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I just wanted to point out your attention to pages 84 and 85. This is the pay and classification plan. Wanted to make sure I point that out to you specifically. When you adopt your budget ordinance, you are by reference adopting this plan. And then again on pages 86 to 90, that is the schedule of fees. And again, when you adopt your budget ordinance, you are by reference adopting that schedule as well. All right. Is there anything additional or any clarification that manager, mayor, any of you want to add or have questions on?
The only thing I do want to go back for a moment on the police, on the pay plan. We did include all the employees, so remember we had a discussion about chief and captain. They are included in this budget. And I just want to make sure for the public that much of this that's proposed was recommended in the police assessment. You remember we talked about that in your retreat. I just want to make sure that we bring that forward, that this were steps to implement many of those items in that assessment. Even though Amy said that there's 6.5 employees budgeted, we're going to put 2 in for the cops. So if we're successful in that, there would be 8 total, 8.5 total this year in this budget, within this budget context year, new employees. So those are really the only 2 things I wanted to bring forward a little bit further.
What does
Alright.
filing fees have to do with anything with the town budget?
Where are you?
Page
The
86.
schedule fee sets out the candidate filing fees. I'm not real familiar with the details of that. That's been in there a long time. I would guess, my assumption from that is that the municipality gets to set what that fee is for those running for office.
Yes. So, but I think that's, is
Yeah.
that the regular price for all municipalities, or you're saying it's,
Yeah, like I said, I haven't looked into that. I would have to do some more research to get some background on that.
Is that just information purposes up there?
Yeah, good question. I don't,
I bet it's established by Wake County, but we'll verify that.
that's what I'm thinking as well. Okay,
all right.
all right, thank you.
Your public hearing is scheduled for Tuesday, May the 2nd. And then, as the manager mentioned, once that public hearing is held, you will have met all statutory requirements under the budget. You are free to adopt anytime between May 2nd, but no later than July 1st. Be at your discretion.
There are 2 public hearings, right, Amy? There's the budget and there's the economic development public hearing?
Just one.
Just one, we've combined them now. And then also, on May 2nd, we'll bring forward the request from the chamber. You can either adopt that, you can approve that night also, or at least you'll have it in front of you for consideration. So we always try and,
Say that again, Kelly, I didn't hear you.
we always try and have the Chamber of Commerce adopted also in conjunction with the budget. So that night, it'll be ready for your adoption too, if you are ready, or whenever you're ready to do that. Or
That would
talk
be a
about it.
separate exercise.
Yes, it'll be separate. It'll be approval of the MOU.
I have a question on Parks and Rec. I don't see the Parks and Rec director here tonight. But during our 5-hour budget session, we talked about fees. And he was gonna update the non-resident fees, and I don't see that it's changed. So I don't know if that's an oversight, but we talked about that, and he was going to change that. Because I do think Parks and Rec definitely is a service to our town, but us funding Wake County is not a good exercise for us.
What page is that?
90.
We will get you information soon on that.
Thank you.
So this will be posted on the website starting tomorrow, or it's already up there?
Yes, sir. I've been in communication with Lindsay Owens, our communications specialist today, to make sure that we get that out on the website, something on social media, News Blast, et cetera.
Any questions for staff, financial director?
It's the same numbers he had before. We discussed 93.
As always, if you have questions between now and May 2nd, let us know. Did
You have a
you-
question? No? No, sir. Any question on this end down here? Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate that. We will accept the budget as presented for right now and have our public hearing on this second. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay, item 2, Wake County Site Identification Study. Michael, I think you may lead the discussion with this one.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're going to talk about a study or a program with Wake County Economic Development and with the firm Creative Economic Development Consulting. The town, along with the other 11 municipalities in the county, have been participating in this program or study to identify some priority sites for industrial or corporate development in each municipality. Tonight, we have with us Crystal Morphus. She's the founder and CEO of Economic Development Consulting. She's here to present her findings in Rollsville. And you might recall that her firm conducted the market analysis piece for the commercial growth feasibility study that we did last year with O'Brien Atkins. We also with Wake County Economic Development, Morgan Bliss, she's the senior research manager with Wake County Economic Development. She's in the room as well if there are questions for Wake County. This project falls under the town's goal of creating a diverse mix of commercial, industrial, and residential development, increasing the town's commercial tax base. And no action requested or required tonight, just here for discussion and some Q&A. And with that, I'll turn it over to Crystal. Let me help pull this up here.
Thank you.
All right, let's go.
It is good to be back with you, Mayor and council members. We were talking earlier, I believe I was here in person once and maybe virtually talking about the commercial growth feasibility study and the market analysis portion that we did. So I'm glad to kind of follow up on that in many ways and talk about the site identification project of Wake County. This project, launched by Wake County Economic Development, has as a goal to find the best industrial site in each municipality. So we are working through all 12 municipalities across Wake County and identifying future development areas in each one of the towns. In this process, it follows up on the previous work that you had done in the commercial growth corridor feasibility study. I want to first mention a little bit about industrial development as Michael and I talk about it. For this community, it really looks a lot different. When you hear the term industrial development, some people automatically think about traditional manufacturing or industry that you may see across other parts of the state. Right now in Wake County, what we are seeing, what the community is seeing, is a lot of corporate development really in life sciences and technology sectors. And if you think back to the work we did in the feasibility study, it really looked at those life science companies and high technology companies, even office sectors as well. So I just wanted to share some images across Wake County from other municipalities and developments. So as we talk about industrial development, really think more of those higher end technology companies and life science companies. Those are the companies that are interested in this region because of the workforce that you have. And now, if you think back to the market feasibility study, we talked a lot about the talented workers that you have living in this community that work in other places that would really enjoy a shorter commute and would like to work in Rollsville. So as we talk about development, keep these images in mind. The scope of work of the Site ID project really started off by talking about the development areas and the growth goals in Rollsville. We had the pleasure of having worked in this community before and understanding the growth goals of the community and also looking at some of those potential development areas. We then did some additional research on each of the development areas in that corridor feasibility study. We did go and visit those with Michael. We toured the development area again and really narrowed them down, and we identified a priority site. So our assessments included a lot of the things that we had looked at before, but we just went back through them again about access, compatible land use, curb appeal, floodplain, any restrictions on the properties. And this map, it should be familiar to you from the commercial growth feasibility study. Just to note, we focused, of course, on the purple areas on the map. Those are the ones that were designated for research and technology purposes. So you'll see areas across that corridor from east to west, and we focused on those purple areas. One of the things I'll also note about that planning process, when you see those purple building footprints, the goal of that project was really to look at some of the maximum maximum building footprints. Really, as you think about developing these, the building footprints could look very different. It could be a campus of smaller buildings. It could be where you see one large purple building footprint now. It could be 4 or 5 smaller. And as you think about the types of companies, especially technology companies, their footprints may be smaller. So again, the goal of that was to see how much building footprint could fit in those areas, when in reality they may develop a little bit differently. So again, our focus was on the purple areas. So the first area that we looked at was on the, if you're looking on the map, on the western side of the corridor. There's almost 300 acres along that Highway 41 area. One of the some of the things that stand out is there's already access to that. Michael and I actually drove up to a road that could be enhanced to provide access to that development area. Could provide highway visibility. If you think about the types of the corporations that would find this area attractive, highway visibility could be important to them. Utilities are adjacent. There are really no impediments. It is zoned for residential now. One of the features of this area, it is served by Wake Electric. The electric co-op, North Carolina Electric Cooperatives, has recently launched a funding program for site certification and site assessments, and so there could be some benefit here in a partnership with Wake Electric as you further evaluate and develop develop this area. So that stood out as definitely an advantage for this site. The next area that we focused in on is the 98 acres off of Young Street and Rollsville Road. You see it circled kind of in an orange yellow. That is an area that has a lot of mix of uses happening. You have education, you have residential in that area. It is near the other highway for commercial development, and there's some access road already down Rollsville Road. Water is being extended, as you know. Sewer is adjacent. And again, that one is zoned residential, low density.
Can I stop you for just a
Yes.
moment? Just for the benefit of the public, is there any way you can use a pointer and maybe describe the intersections? Because this is hard to see. I know we can see it up close, but.
Let's see if this has
I thought that one was,
How to use
was
the red.
in the,
Is there-
I thought that one, Mike, was in the land use plan as mixed use, not residential.
It is in the future land use plan, mixed-use neighborhood, player options.
But in the future one, but not the present one?
The one on Rollsville
Oh,
Road.
great.
Thank
Great,
you.
yes.
Is
Let me
that not
just-
right? It's
let me
mixed,
just go back.
it's presently in comprehensive land use plan as mixed use, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Go back here. So Highway 401 area, I'll kind of use my pointer here. And then there's a small road, it's kind of hard to see, that comes off and provides access into this area here. So there could be highway visibility, and this will be on the western side of town. In this site, so here is the school in this area. There's a new residential development in this area. And so it's directly across Rollsville Road here to the left in this area here. The next area that we looked at is just north of the school. So if this is the school again, this is not part of the commercial growth area feasibility study, but Michael and I looked at this area here because it's near this intersection of the highway here just north of the school, and this residential development is coming in this area. This could be a potential for additional mixed use, so think maybe some commercial along the highway, but there's really some nice land behind that could be used for industrial development. You have water adjacent, sewer and natural gas are nearby. Again, it is zoned residential. And you have access here with the highway right in front of it there. So this is a call out of some of the parcels in that area.
I didn't think we could put industrial in the watershed, though.
That could be my question.
That was your question, too?
Yeah. What is the potential?
Because that's the Little River watershed there.
We contacted the city of Raleigh, and some of the property is in the watershed, and they said that they would extend water and sewer. to the
We can
property.
extend it, but I don't think we can put industrial in there. I think it's restricted from industrial. I think.
We have to double check on that.
We'll have to-
I mean, you can stand, you're right, that you can stand water in there, but you can't.
But if we
you can't
double
do-
check, it may be that office development for technology would be acceptable.
It's permeability.
Do what?
It's about the permeability, right?
Yeah, we'll have, it can only be developed, what, 18% pervious or something like that, and, it's very restricted.
I just have a quick question because this land is privately owned. So I know that's another conversation. But really quick, if somebody says no, what does that mean?
She's going to get into that.
Yes, yes.
Because I'm thinking, okay,
Yes, thank you for that. So the priority ranking is the first site that I mentioned, which is the 292 acres, and I'll go back to that in just a minute. The second one is the 98 acres on Rollsville Road, and then third will be the additional acreage on 401. So I'll go back and talk about this and why it is the priority site. So this is a priority site. It's under one owner. I mentioned how utilities are adjacent to it. It is adjacent to highway and has highway visibility. The fact that it is served by Wake Electric also offers some additional benefit to development in this area. And given the highway network there and access network, it would make it more a priority area versus the other. As you think about the other areas along the Fowler Road extension, they'll be developed a little bit later as the highway is developed and additional infrastructure is extended. But this area here on the eastern side, we believe is be the priority for industrial development first, and would have more interest from private developers because of the things I mentioned with access. So I'll go on to next steps. Continuing to work with landowners. So throughout the feasibility study process, there was a lot of landowner engagement. You held meetings for landowners, and your staff has continued to engage with landowners. So continuing that landowner engagement is really important. And so to your question, one of the things that's important is to relay the town's vision. If you think about other municipalities in Wake County that have had a lot of success in recruiting, especially technology and life science companies, you can look to Holly Springs as an example. The foundations that were laid in Holly Springs were laid many, many years ago, and that town had a vision for how an area in Holly Springs could be developed and how it could provide well-paying jobs to their citizens so they didn't have to commute out of Holly Springs. And you see the results of that many years later. Sometimes we think that that happened really quickly, but it didn't. It happened over a long period of time with a council just like you that created a vision for how jobs, well-paying jobs could be created in their community. So continuing those landowner engagement is important, sharing your vision, making sure that you have proper zoning in place in the future, and that you work with those landowners on that vision for the future. So gathering some site data, working with your partner, Wake County Economic Development, to promote this property for that for those industrial use or mix of uses that you want to see in the town, and even working to control some properties. So Holly Springs did that in the past. They wanted to make sure that they had land reserved for industrial development, and so they took a proactive action in controlling property. I mentioned Wake Electric and their Ready Site program. There's an opportunity there for you to partner with them and for them to partner with the landowner in a public-private partnership to facilitate due diligence assessments, which are things like phase 1 and geotechnical studies and additional site planning. And then you can take the work that was already, I'll go back to the original map here, this work that was originally done by O'Brien Atkins, and can continue working on this map to make it more real, if you will, For example, you can take the site on the eastern side, a priority site, and develop alternate site plans that show multiple building footprints and layouts. You can turn those into 3D models with something like a drone flyover video to show how it can actually look. So if we go back to this, you can actually take that flat 2D and turn it into 3D modeling to show the public how something like this could be in your community and providing jobs for people. Gives away that. And then just start initiating some marketing. So Wake County Economic Development has requests that come in regularly for sites to create the types of corporate and business centers that we've talked about here. And so working with your partners to help market this to developers to make sure that your vision is put in place. So those would be some next steps. But to your question, it really, if you think about other municipalities in Wake County that have attracted those types of technology companies, they've had a vision, they have worked with landowners to control property and to promote that property to make sure that that vision comes to fruition. So I'll stop there and
That's for
answer
those who
any
want to hear
questions.
that.
Excuse me?
That's for those who would like to hear that, but for those who are steadfast in owning their property, what does that mean?
So one of the things that you can do as a town is form public-private partnerships with landowners that can help advance the promotion of those properties. And as a town, you could consider controlling property. Some towns and their affiliate economic nonprofit organizations purchase property to reserve it for industrial development or even larger commercial developments. So some towns and local governments have been very proactive in controlling, reserving, and even working with landowners in public-private partnerships.
Okay, so I just want to be clear on what I'm saying. If they are adamant about not being involved, what happens?
Well, as a government,
Okay,
as a government, the tools that you have at your disposal really are public policies. So, for example, area planning and zoning policy are some policies that you have where you can influence the development. And then if you, like other towns or local governments, if you want to purchase property and develop it, for example, through a related nonprofit organization.
Yeah, on the 3 sites that
Okay.
you presented tonight, I know 2 of them are not for sale.
that's what I'm saying.
They're not on the market,
I know.
and I don't think nobody on something like that.
Is that
So-
the last two?
No, it's the first one and the third one.
Yes,
Kidding.
The first one and third one is not on the market. It could be one day, but I know now it's not on the market.
they're not thinking about
Because if they
selling.
were, they would have LOIs on them. And one of them, the third one has a LOI on it already. So, you know,
But that's like that's the third one. That's not really, I mean, I know you all evaluated more than 3, and out of all 3, that's the least favorite, but it's still doable. I'm not sure if favorite is the right word, but like Ronnie said, one of them I know.
yeah, and
They're
I have
not
a
hearing it.
question. And I think on your first slide, you said Wake County was looking, and maybe this is more of a Wake County question. We're looking for industrial in town, and it appeared to me these are just either in town or in our ETJ. So we're not allowed to look outside the ETJ. Is that true? Is that why? Because there's so many properties that would I think the landowners will work with us, but we don't look outside of the ETJ.
So I can answer that. So with this site study, we are looking outside of municipal ETJs. And we have looked at property, for example, between Rollsville and Wake Forest, for example. We focused on this area because it's a plan that the town was already familiar with, landowner engagement had already happened, and it really focused in on that future Fowler Road extension. If the council is interested in industrial development outside of this corridor in other areas, then we can go and look further out, as we've done with other municipalities. So some we've looked, of course, we look within the limits, we look in ETJ, but then we've even looked further out. And in some cases, for multiple town or town-county partnerships, so it doesn't have to be just one municipality. But again, we focused on this area because it's an area that the town had already invested in studying.
Yeah, I know one piece, it's almost 200 acres. It's got good road on 3 sides, and the landowner don't want residential. To me, that would be a perfect person to talk to. You know.
Sure. So, I mean, we will be happy to go and look at areas outside of this if the town wants to study areas outside of this corridor.
By any chance, do you look at any properties inside of the watershed?
We do, just like you mentioned, there are development restrictions on that. We do, but you have to really have a concise development plan for that.
And Wake County can probably help us out with that, correct?
Yes,
I need your contact, ma'am.
yeah. So the feedback that I'm hearing is to go back and evaluate these priority areas based on the information that you've shared. And then would you also like for us to look at areas outside of the town's ETJ?
Yes.
Sounds to me like that. is
I
what-
feel like, go ahead. I feel like I heard you say that other municipalities have a vision, and I think this is the beginning of our vision, but it sounds like there's some more input on this vision, to me, because the first two of the three sites that you named, the 1 and 2, are ones that are desirable areas for this type of development. If you don't have your landowners on board as a part of that vision, I feel like that needs some more massaging. That's just my thoughts. But it certainly doesn't hurt to get additional areas.
Yeah, I think, there's some land that we could probably look at that already has roads in there, which to me would save a lot of cost.
It's not in Roseville. It's in our ETJ or outside of it?
It's outside,
I just think going to the watershed is going to be,
but it's not in the watershed.
no, and I think we need to stay out of the
Yeah,
watershed because we're going to get hit with so
Meredith,
much
you
resistance.
showed me that list. I think there's certain items that you can't put in the watershed, and I think industrial is one of them. if I
That's going to
recall.
be an expensive,
Now,
possible no.
we can run, you're right, we can run water in there, but it's still restricted for usage, I think.
I would encourage you to, as you think about this development plan, about the work that went into this development plan and the landowner engagement that went into this plan, and you're going to have a lot of growth around that corridor, and thinking about how to reserve some of that property for industrial development. And when I say that, of course, I mean, life science and technology in this sector. Because as you know, residential does not provide the level of return to provide the services that you want to provide to your citizens. And so even if some of this property may not be available for some long period of time, having that long view of how that property could benefit the town in the future in terms of the return on tax base and investment is really important to consider.
It is.
When you say corridor, you're talking about the Fowler Road extension,
Yes. Yeah.
which I think one thing we had to figure out is how to put that. The 2021 study estimate was what was it, $44 million to put that in. So, how do we do that?
And I would encourage you to talk to your colleagues in Holly Springs, and that's just another example that keeps coming to my mind, about how many years ago they wanted to find a way to recruit companies that would provide well-paying jobs for their citizens. And the town invested in property and infrastructure extension, and they've had some very good success with that. And they're looking now to what is the next step forward for them. And this is such a fast-growing community with so much residential pressure that if communities like yours and others in Wake County don't start reserving property for something other than residential, then eventually you'll find yourself in a position where you are not getting the return on tax investment that you would need to provide the services that you want.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think we got to find someone, like Holly Springs had Mr. Holland, and Mr. Holland had a lot of acres out there, and he first put his grill industry out there, and it was his vision really help Holly Springs turn into a big industrial park. But we need to find a Mr. Holland in our area that has the land to be able to help us with that. We don't have one.
Are there incentives, though, for landowners? Because part of the issue is, if I own farmland, right, I'm not paying as much taxes. And then if the town decides to, we're going to designate this for industrial, then you've got an issue because then my taxes are going to be higher. what incentives can we offer to landowners to kind of incent them in that way during that period of decision?
Yeah, so as you work through public-private partnerships, I mentioned if on the continuum, one is a local government, either directly or through a nonprofit affiliated economic development organization, will purchase property so that you develop it in the way that you want it to be developed. Then there are many ranges of public-private partnerships. There are some public-private partnerships where in the entity, they will, for example, guarantee to purchase at X, and then they'll make some they have a floor for the price. They'll make some investments, and then the landowner realizes an increased value for their property because of town or local government enhancements. So there can be a carrot for the landowner for public investment because it'll then sell at a higher price than it would have today, for example. And there's land banking and some other things that can be done to work
There's
with
some
landowners.
tax deferment for like farm use, even if it's there, and then when it's sold, it has to divert back for a certain couple of years. So I think you can get the deferment if you have that land, you're an owner, as long as it's kept in that use, whether it be timber or horticulture or agriculture. On there, you can do that. So it doesn't affect them at present, it affects them at sale.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Hill, you're talking about if we annex it, we would be able to do that, is that what you're saying? Because they don't pay any taxes to us unless we annex them.
Right.
That's what we need to do.
So,
When annexed, you had a zoning request at some point.
because right now, anything out there outside of the limits is just paying Wake County taxes, you know,
Right.
like you.
One of the issues that we've ran into further outside the municipality is the extension of infrastructure. Whereas the priority site here has infrastructure adjacent, and in the other sites, infrastructure is being extended to that area for residential and the other development. Depending upon where we looked outside of Rolesville, that could be one of the hurdles is the expansion of infrastructure.
Thank you both for
Yes.
answering my question.
Other question or input?
So when you leave here, what task are you going to do for us?
So from what I'm gathering from this group, we'll go and take another look a little bit further out of additional properties, and then we'll provide that information back to town staff. That would be information that would be confidential because it would be outside of a study area. And anytime that a local government board, receives information on potential industrial development land, that can be confidential. So we'll return that to staff, and then we'll talk with them about the best way to get that information to you, probably in closed session.
How long will that take?
That's a really good question. I'll say probably within the next 3 to 4 weeks, and I say that because we are scheduled to make a presentation to Wake County in June and talk to them about the overall needs that municipalities have for support for industrial development, and we would want to make sure that we would have this concluded before we present it to Wake County.
So so maybe you can have a conversation about releasing some of that watershed so we won't have to go through all this. That would be really nice.
So as we talk to Wake County, there's a lot of support that county governments can provide to municipalities as we think about prioritizing transportation improvements and infrastructure improvements and land use, for example, and even where Wake County zoning abuts up to municipal zoning, to ensure that there's consistency there, even code enforcement areas around the town. There are a lot of things to talk to the county about related to how they can better facilitate and support development in and around municipalities.
Do you know how far out can you go when you're in the ETJ? How far out can Roseville go
It
beyond?
depends, there's different ETJ limits. What is Rolesville's?
I don't know.
I would need to look at it. It's based upon population.
Okay. Population, current population or anticipated, like with approved?
It's based upon your latest population, and then it's coordinated with the county.
Okay.
What was your last part? It's according what?
With the-
Coordinated with the county.
Made it. Got you.
And there's currently a bill in the General Assembly to eliminate ETJ entirely.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing for Roseville?
Be a bad thing.
That would be a bad thing for Rolesville.
bad thing for all towns.
It really would. Okay. Thank you
Any
so
other
much.
questions or comments?
Thank you.
So Chris, I think one thing we're also going to do, once your work is completed, we're going to take this and your work, and you heard in the budget, there's a comp plan update. So I think that would be also, you mentioned that, I think, briefly, but that would be a next step, that we would run this through the comp plan update. And that would re-verify
Yes.
this area of designation and interest. And then whatever comes out of that would be kind of the future beyond this plan, right? And that'd be held in the comp plan then.
Yeah, it's very important for communities to have that vision. I was sharing with Michael a story of a community that I know that created a long-range vision for economic development, and it took 15, 20 years for that vision to come to fruition. And there were many opportunities along the way to stray from that vision, but they were steadfast, and it paid off. And as we talked about that commercial growth area, you'll feel, and landowners will feel, a lot of pressure for other types of development, but confirming that vision and then sticking to it will reap rewards down the road for the town and for citizens. It's hard to do, though.
But I agree with you. The clearer our vision, or clearer the board's vision, the easier it is to go and sell it to a landowner or try and work with them. If you don't have a clear vision and you're all over the board and you're still researching, they're going to be looking at you like you guys don't have it together. So I think that's critical.
Yes.
Critical.
Okay, well, we will return with more information. I appreciate the feedback and the good conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry.
That's all right. Next item is the Averett, Young, and Roseville Road Corridor Study. And I see Meredith is coming up. You taking the lead on this one?
I'm doing an introduction. So, good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. So I am excited to have Exalt Engineering with us today. We have Kathy Kennedy, Brittany Chase, and Lisa Lundeen, and they will be up here in just a moment. We are here to kick off the corridor study for Averett, Young, and Roseville roads. We've been talking about this for a little while, so it is great we're getting this going. So this project was identified in our 2021 Community Transportation Plan, and this is important to take a look at. In my time here, we've had a lot of discussion about projects in that corridor and understanding how do we let more development happen in a responsible fashion, and we want that development, and we will be seeing thousands of more homes and more commercial development in that corridor, and we want to make sure everything's functioning as well as it can be. So I'd love to hand it over to Brittany. Are you kicking it off? Okay, I'll do it. Okay, great. I'll hand it over to Exalt Engineering.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us and including us in this work session. We're excited about the opportunity to work with you all on this important project for the town.
I think she introduced you, but if you would, just for the record, introduce each other.
Okay.
And
Our
kind of your
next slide
address.
has that. Is that okay if
Okay,
we
but
just-
be sure you include your
Okay.
address for the record, too,
Okay.
if you would.
All right, so we just prepared this presentation to provide y'all with some information, and then we've set some time aside at the end to just questions, discussion, and just overall feedback. And, we really want to hear your specific concerns related to the safety and operation along the corridor, and as well as things you want to see addressed in the study. Okay. We'd like to start by introducing ourselves. My name is Brittany Chase, and I've been designated as the overall project manager for the corridor study. My focus at Exalt is primarily traffic capacity analysis for both public sector and private sector projects.
I'm Lisa Lundeen. I'll be leading the traffic safety analysis and the traffic forecasting parts of this project. That is my main focused area at Exalt, as well as public projects and private development projects.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Kennedy, and I will be leading the roadway side, or the conceptual design cost estimate. So as the team develops what the recommendations would work well, I'll help kind of create that as a visual of what that looks like, so you can have an understanding.
As Meredith mentioned, the Community Transportation Plan identified this corridor as a critical north-south link throughout Rollsville. The study will look at both roadway segments and critical intersections along the corridor. For the corridor analysis, we will be looking at both existing and future cross-sections that were recommended in the Community Transportation Plan. We'll be projecting traffic volumes out 10 years by considering existing volumes, growth, approved development, traffic zoning, and potential rezoning along the corridor. We'll analyze the key intersections in a similar manner by looking at that 10-year projection and considering existing lane geometry and any committed improvements at those intersections. And we don't want this study to be something that just is looked at and sits on the shelf. We really want this to be a tool for your future decision-making process. Just in general with planning and funding for town projects, but as well as when you're considering rezoning for proposed developments that come online. The developer will submit a traffic study that will look at intersections, but we also want you to have an idea of what's going on along those corridor segments, the roadway segments. As I mentioned, we'll be looking at the recommended cross-sections from the Community Transportation Plan. So we want to look at to see if those are sufficient to accommodate what we're expecting in 10 years traffic volume-wise. And wanted to talk to you about potential developer contributions. If we identify a specific improvement is needed at an intersection and there's some developments coming in that area, maybe there's a way to collect some contributions depending on the percent impact at that intersection by each development. So in discussions with town staff, the intersections that we've identified as the 5 key intersections along the corridor, starting at the north, I don't know if this is still on the pointer, but I'll just use this. We've got Averett Road at NC 98. It's a signalized intersection today. And then, okay, that'd be great. Perfect, thank you. Young Street at South Main. I like to consider this the heart of Rollsville. Young Street at US 401. Young Street at Rollsville High School driveway. And from speaking with a friend whose children go to the high school, the driveway, we're questioning if we should look at Quarry Road at Young Street as well because of the access onto Quarry Road from the high school. But it sounds like the driveway is what's going to capture the majority of that high school traffic. Carpool uses that driveway, staff parking, student parking. So that's really going to capture the student population using that
I'm sorry, driveway. what do you mean by that? It's going to capture it? You're talking about on Roseville Road and Quarry Road?
No, the majority are used at this driveway. We considered looking at the Quarry Road at Young Street as well, because there's a driveway off of Quarry Road for the high school, but it doesn't sound like a lot of students or staff use the Quarry Road entrance. They use the actual driveway that's on Young Street directly into the school. So this one right here.
So who uses the other side now?
Buses and visitors, and I think a few staff use that, but it's
not many, but we've asked them to change that.
okay.
So I don't know if I think they.
They swap, I don't have a kid there anymore. It's been 4 years. But I know they used to swap it, and that road was absolutely awful.
Quarry Road?
Yes.
Okay.
Because they would come out on the back end where the baseball fields are. And once they came down that little traveling road on campus, make that left onto Quarry Road, and they would always try to beat the buses and stuff going through it, and it was always jam-packed. But they used to alternate it. One year it would be staff using that area. The next year they swapped it to students. I don't know that they still do that.
Okay.
But it was insane, though.
Okay, my current understanding is the majority use the driveway that's directly onto Young Street, but we'll verify that for sure.
Okay.
That is current.
Okay.
I just have a question, just to clarify. I see you have Averett Road and 98 Wade Avenue where it's signalized. Did you also look at Averett Road at Young where it's not signalized yet?
Averett and Young.
Averett Road at Young.
Where's that at?
Yeah, where you mean?
Where's Averett and Young?
Or Jones Dairy.
Are you talking about Jones Dairy?
Jones Dairy.
Yeah,
Maybe it's Jones Dairy.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a second.
I'm like, wait, is it not Averett?
We did talk about including that intersection as well, but with some improvements coming online, we decided not to include that one in the initial 5. There was just 5 that we were able to identify at this time.
I think that's important because of what's coming online.
Yeah,
Is that the one that's going to have the additional lane or two?
I think there's a turn lane.
Okay.
I remember there was the tree issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
The road's going to be
Just,
remember?
so just for clarification, from my clarification, this study does include traffic on those and traffic counts and traffic capacities on those connect roads between the signalized road and Young and Main.
The roadway segments in between here, we will be looking at the volumes there as well, yes, yep. And then the final one, Rollsville Road at Mitchell Mill. So we want to take you a little bit through the project approach. The first step lays the foundation for the corridor study, taking the time to sit down with key stakeholders to ensure everyone's on the same page is the important first step in any successful project, and that's where we are today. And again, we want to use this time to really hear your concerns and talk about objectives of the study. Following tonight's session, we'll also have a kickoff meeting with town staff, and we will use that time to clearly define the scope, talk about overall project deliverables and timeline expectations, as well as really dive into the details and assumptions that we use in the actual volume development and analysis. And we will also identify measures of effectiveness. So if the town wants to see a particular level of service along the corridor or at the intersections or delay, we'll want to have that in mind as we're working on our analysis as well. Okay. Accurate and thorough data collection will set the stage for the entire analysis. So prior to our kickoff meeting with town staff, we will look at daily traffic volumes in and surrounding the corridor to determine an appropriate growth rate to use. We've already conducted a preliminary site visit along the corridor and at each of those study intersections that we discussed. We need to observe existing conditions and document those because all of that information goes into our models. The town's development map, we will research that and get a good idea of the developments that are proposed along the corridor that will impact those traffic volumes that we will see in 10 years, as well as area transportation plans. So are there any future planned roadways that may impact the corridor? We're typically more concerned with roadways that are funded that we know are going to be on the ground in that 10-year span. But all of that, again, goes into the models and will affect those volumes as well. And then following the kickoff meeting, we'll have some additional data collection efforts, traffic counts. We are coming up on summer, so we want to make sure we get those counts in before school goes out. If not, we're going to have to wait until September. So we want to make sure we're ready to go and get that in. If needed, there'll be some follow-up site visits. When we look at our improvements, we also want to be concerned with constructability of these improvements. So we want to go out there and make sure, if a left turn lane is what needs to be there, we want to make sure we can construct that left turn lane without further consequences or issues with design. And then planned projects. So that is in the form of TIAs that have been submitted by other developments in the area, as well as if there's any committed improvements, we want to incorporate that as well. Lisa's going to talk about the volume development.
So we need to look at the 10-year volume development to really know what's going to happen in the next 10 years and be able to accurately predict the future conditions. And to do that, the first thing we're going to do is look at the existing volume counts that we're hopefully going to take before the end of the school year. And we're going to look and see if we need to apply any adjustment factors. And some of those could be seasonal adjustment factors depending on the month that we collect the data. Historically, we've also looked at COVID adjustment factors. We don't think we'll need to adjust anything based on COVID traffic anymore. That was more so in 2020 when traffic was a lot lower than it is today. And the next thing that we're going to look at is the sub-area delineation along the corridor. We're going to kind of break up this corridor into a few different areas. The first would be looking at the existing development. We would hope that most of that traffic is accounted for in the traffic counts that we collect. We're also going to look at the development that is currently under construction. We'll look into if any COs have been issued. And if not, we will also add that into our expected traffic volumes in the future. We're also going to review the submitted traffic impact analyses and look at the amount of traffic that those approved developments will likely generate and add to this corridor. We're also going to look at some of the vacant land along the corridor and look at the potential of future development and what kind of trips that vacant land could potentially generate in the next 10 years. And to look at that, we're going to look at the differences between the current zoning map and the potential for the rezoning. Once we're able to identify or develop all of our volumes, the existing volumes and the future volumes, we're going to put all of that together in our capacity analysis models. And we plan to use Synchro for this, this capacity analysis, which is in line with what NCDOT would use. And we're going to look at a couple different scenarios in Synchro that'll really tell us, you know, the difference between what's happening today and what's happening in the future with and without this project. The first scenario we're going to look at is the existing scenario. So how the intersections and corridor operate today as if nothing were to happen. The next thing we would look at is, 10 years into the future with the same corridor, as if the 10-year volumes were there but nothing happened to this corridor. We're also going to look at 3 build-out alternatives. And the first alternative we're going to look at is the existing cross-sections as they are today, plus any committed roadway improvements by other projects, such as any town projects, DOT projects, or private development projects. The next scenario we're going to look at is with the existing cross-sections today, those committed improvements, and also the potential rezoning traffic that could come from the vacant parcels. Then the last scenario we're planning to look at is with the cross-sections that were identified in the Rolesville Moves Plan, as well as the committed improvements by other developers and the potential rezoning traffic. And by comparing all of these scenarios, we'll be able to tell, hopefully be able to tell which one will work best with the future conditions. Another part of our scope is the traffic safety analysis. I know that was a big concern along this corridor is traffic safety. And as you can see along this map, this is some preliminary data from NCDOT along the corridor, and this red line right here covers most of this corridor. And it was identified with high safety score sections, which could mean there are high-frequency crash locations or severe crash locations. These green dots here also represent fatal or serious injury crash locations in the last 5 years. And then these blue dots indicate just high-frequency crash locations in the last 5 years. And so those are special areas that we'll pay attention to during our safety analysis. So to conduct the safety analysis, we'll request the 5-year crash history from NCDOT and summarize that data and compare the critical crash rates to the statewide average crash rates. We'll also look at the different crash types and crash patterns to be able to identify any correctable crash types and patterns. And we'll also look at existing safety issues and how we could correct any of those. Next, Kathy's going to talk about the roadway recommendations. And
So Lisa and Brittany have kind of talked about what's going into the model and how we're going to be evaluating what the traffic patterns are doing. And ultimately, they're going to be looking for what improvements help that level of service, help move the traffic along the corridor. And that's where I'll kind of come in and be working with them and collaborating as the model's identifying a left turn lane and seeing how that fits in. So what else could we do if it doesn't fit? What are our options? How can we improve upon this corridor and get that? So we'll be doing these, develop these conceptual designs. Part of that too, they're giving me some information, but we also have the capital or community transportation plan, which has made some recommendations on what the typical section will be. So combining that plus the recommended turning movements or other changes at those 5 intersections is what we're going to focus on and give you a visual. So you can see on the screen, there's an example. Blue is where there's existing pavement in this case, and red is where there was additional pavement needed to create the needed movements. So we would create something like this, again, for those 5 intersections that have been identified. We'll also give you a cost estimate of an opinion of probable cost estimate for what those improvements will entail and cost. And we'll build upon recent bid tabs in the area, as well as DOT's kind of statewide rates to develop that and apply a conceptual level estimate.
Make sure I understand that intersection you're talking about there.
Yep.
So we got a $22 million project, and we're improving that intersection. It hasn't been done yet, but we're spending money to improve that intersection. You say you may come back and you plan to do something different from that?
Well, hopefully not. So when we put in the models of what's needed, so that's what we're kind of running that future 10-year projection out of what the traffic demands are gonna need. So in theory and hope that the project that is currently going on has taken that into consideration in terms of what growth is coming and therefore is planning for those improvements. So I will be pulling that, like I said, the community transportation plan had some. We can pull from that Main Street as well and incorporate that in to the visual that you get. And some of that, it may look existing, or look like it's future, but because it's ongoing, it'll kind of be a...
Right, because I think where I'm at, and I think where this board is at, I think listening to them, you know, we just did the Roseville Road, and they came with a recommendation that's practical, that, you know, that can be done. And now we got several developers investing in doing that plan. And I think the board was looking for, you know, how do we keep from overloading that in future approvals? You know, how do we, ain't that right? How do we take what we have on paper and lay on top of it a comprehensive plan that doesn't corrupt that much? Or they feel comfortable in future land use planning that fits kind of what we can practically do? Because I think Roseville Road, it was determined in the last study we had, because we talked about it for many, many meetings, that you can't put a 4-lane there. That's just not practical for some reason, and I can't remember, but it was not practical to put a 4-lane there. So, you know, I think, am I right?
No, you're right.
What we're looking for
I feel like what they're doing, though, is what we're looking
can you advise the
for.
board, and what can be, what is a good land use, you know, comprehensive land use plan that will kind of be, they can be comfortable approving going forward on usage, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and any committed improvements or planned improvements will be incorporated into the models as well. So we won't be redoing, you know, any improvements that are made. It would be adding on or, you know.
Yeah.
Modifying here.
And the way I describe it, a lot of cases too, and I know a lot of transportation engineers, when I describe it a lot, you know, a sanitary line or a water line is very easy. I mean, you got the size and you know what's the capacity of it, and you can't overdo that. I mean, we can't overcapacity. And I hear that roads is a little bit more complicated for, you know, determining the people change their directions a lot. Yeah. So, but I think that's what the board's looking for, is what's their limits without overburden the road, is kind of.
With the developments.
With future developments. Because we've already, ain't that right?
Yeah, I do feel it, because I had asked for just what you're offering us, to really see if all of the developers that come before us and say, oh, our TI, our traffic analysis says this. We're like, but what about the one before, and what about the one in the next town over? Is that really going to happen? But it seems like what you're going to be putting together, at least in this, for this corridor, will either put our minds at ease or make us think, yeah, I knew that was too much.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
and
hoping that's what
This is comprehensive. This includes
Right.
all those developments at once, so you
Right.
really see what's needed. The TIA looks at just that one single development's impact.
Right, and but they're always saying to us, oh yeah, we compared it, we took measures to incorporate that into our findings. But sometimes I just feel like, did you really? Because I'm still seeing a lot of traffic and we're not even built out yet. So are we right in assuming that what you're going to do is going to bring all of that together so we can have somewhat of an idea of, you're not even close to capacity
Right.
with your traffic, or what if it comes back and it says, you're at capacity? What happens to the next developer that comes before us?
Well, and that's what we will identify, those necessary improvements. And, like we talked about, maybe there's a way to get some developer contributions to us. If you know that something is needed at Young and Main, and a bunch of development comes in kind of, around that area, then you can say, we know that we're gonna need a left turn lane here. It's gonna cost X amount of dollars, but, given these 4 developments that are gonna contribute pretty significantly to this area, it might not trigger an improvement in their TIA, but maybe we should collect a little bit here, so each one kind of adds up to that $300,000 or whatever it is.
And that's
for
the
that
point
turn.
of it. We're trying to get ahead of it, so they're not coming in and offering up the bare minimum
Yep,
in some
Right.
cases, right?
yep.
So the whole point of the study is to be proactive, so that we can push back and say,
Yes.
we've done a study, we know what's needed, and this is what is required.
Yes.
And it sounds like this will also help us as far as land development. If the land is zoned for this, and someone else wants it rezoned for this, we'll know whether that's feasible or not, based on the
Yeah.
amount of traffic that the
Yeah,
road can.
as we have it now, we'll have one kind of potential rezoning scenario that we'll look at. And so we'll be able to look at that vacant land rezoned and figure out what that would be, what that would need infrastructure-wise to support that.
So planning would have all of this because they're going to be working with you, correct?
Yes.
And then the planning board, hopefully when we see this as a board here, I'm also with the planning board, there shouldn't be a lot of pushback. It should just be common sense, I hope. Like, okay, this is what we're going to have to do in order to get this plan approved. I'm hoping that's how it works. Meredith, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Versus them saying, no, we're not going to do it, or we want the town to pay for it, or this, that, or the other. We're trying to we don't want to do that.
And one thing I also wanted to say in regards to that is, if we identify that any of those recommended cross-sections from the CTP are not sufficient to accommodate that potential rezoning, maybe that there's a change that comes about to the CTP of what that ultimate cross-section needs to be. And when you do the frontage widening, your developers come in and do the frontage widening, then they're widening for what it really needs to be and not just,
Not just turn lane.
and if it's not sufficient, what was recommended in the CTP, so.
So I'd really like to see the Jones Dairy intersection included with those 5 you had. And then also, I understand where the plan's going, but, so like as an example, so from 98 to Jones Dairy Road, we have all this development and everything else, and you'll be able to tell us like capacity-wise, like, let's say we're at 90% capacity right now. I mean, we could put a 6-lane road through there too, and always, keep adding and adding, but I want to keep to a point where we're like, this makes sense. Like, this should be a 3-lane road. It's done. We don't need to build any more out there. Like, that's where I want to see that too. I mean, yeah, you can always widen roads and this and that, but I just want to make sure it makes sense too
Can't always
with that.
widen
Yeah.
roads.
This will be for 10 years out, though.
Okay.
That's kind of our maximum timeline. that we're
Okay.
looking
But I just want to say, because you did not include that, and you said why, can you repeat that?
at. Well, the original RFQ was for 5 intersections. And
Okay.
so we took a look at what we thought were the most critical. And with upcoming work at both Quarry Road and Jones Dairy, we
Yeah.
just,
And I think if you're looking at, if it's only 5 and because really, if you think about it, the north piece on our end, it's nothing else to improve up there. Everything's
Right.
kind of built out. Well, not
Yeah.
built out, but it's been proved out.
Well, I just worry about the influx from Wake Forest down Jones Dairy into that area, because that's going to be that's going to be a really wide road. So if we kind of leave that out, I feel like we're missing a piece of the puzzle there.
and I don't know if you want to speak to
Well, it's
the
true.
crash
I mean,
data
everybody's growing around us,
cross-section difference.
but we
Yeah.
don't have more land up there.
In the community transportation plan, we did notice that from Waite Avenue to Jones Dairy was identified as a 4-lane section, and then from Jones Dairy to Mitchell Mill was identified as a 3-lane section. We also did notice that there were some crashes at Jones Dairy. And that is something that we could also look into, is the specific safety concerns at that intersection.
Can I just say that, can I just ask if any of the planning board members have any questions to ask? Or are they just taking it all in?
Meredith, did I remember, she mentioned something about negotiating or asking the developers to throw in or pitch in if we needed a left lane in our work session. Didn't I hear that we weren't, as planning board, able to do that or to do that?
Wasn't taking money.
What are you eating? Oh, your little sea salt? It's all good. Hey.
Want to make sure I understand your question, Steve. You're saying, is that when we went through our training?
When we went through our training, one of the
You want to
issues-
come up, so make sure everyone at home gets to hear you too, since you have good questions?
Sure.
Okay. Don't be shy, Steve.
I may be missing something, but during the training session, first of all, you mentioned that if we had a bad intersection, perhaps it was identified that it might need a left turn lane, as an illustration. And you said you could get these different developers to throw something into the kitty. But if I remember in our work session, you said we can't ask for additional improvements outside the TIA as a board. So how would that happen?
If we have an adopted plan or policy or program, we have that to lean on. We
Okay.
can't just make something up.
So
Does that
do we
sound-
have that
I might need help from the
adopted plan?
attorney. You could probably say it better.
Two different issues coming together. One is, what can you require with regard to your development standards? And you can absolutely require for every developer that they meet the adopted standards which have the power of an ordinance. So that would be plans we have adopted, cross-sections we have adopted, details for construction, all of those kind of things, standards. The other thing that sometimes comes up before the planning board are folks who are requesting a change in the law via a rezoning. If your change in the law is, I would like this changed from the zoning it is to the zoning I wish it were, so I can do a different sort of a project, that person has subjected themselves to a policy decision which may involve conditional zoning. In conditional zoning, there is a give and take of the sort of things that might be the sort of items that would cause a planning board or the Board of Commissioners to vote in the affirmative. You cannot impose a condition, but a condition can certainly be offered or suggested to allow the parties to think about the kind of things that could improve a proposal. So two different things.
So suggesting doesn't mean they being the developer has to adopt it though.
There's nothing that prevents either in a rezoning case, there is nothing preventing the applicant or a member of the board from talking about things that might make the proposal more attractive to the decision maker. The decision maker, however, cannot impose the condition in a legislative case. But they can talk about it.
That answering your question, that we can talk about it, but we can't impose it as the board.
There's one other aspect, David.
So I have a lot of talk about it a lot, and then it comes back to the board between myself and Meredith talking about what the planning board and what the reasoning was behind it, and then it comes to us, and then we have to try to figure that out at that time, right?
Well, hopefully what has occurred is that some conversation went on previously, and the applicant adjusts their plan, or the applicant determines that the suggestion just isn't feasible. At that point, the board can make a decision. Is, on balance, the proposal one worth voting in the affirmative or the negative to adopt? But the important thing for all of our zoning cases, and I know you've heard me say it before, the applicant is asking to change Rollsville's law. And they don't have the power. The applicant never has the power to change the law.
That's right.
Only the board does. Until that happens, the law presumes that every zoning district on the map is the proper one.
It's one other aspect, David, that we think about sometimes, but it's on a kind of a as-needed basis, is each unit has an impact fee that we use for off-site. I mean, whatever it comes to the town for off-site development. And so they are paying a fee to do the things that you're talking about. I mean, it adds up to, a lot of money when you think about $3,000 per unit. We don't have a policy on that, though. I mean, it's where we work with the developer to do that. Now, some towns, my understanding, have a policy for that. You probably know better than I do, where, if we requiring somebody to do off-site and, or in one case, I understand like this major road that we want to put through, Fowler Road, which is much bigger than anybody that builds over there needs, because it's for us, that even things like that is beyond the width of a collector street in a neighborhood that, fees can be used for that. They have a policy how to handle that thing. We don't have a policy on how to handle things like we talk about here.
While we may have a policy, we don't have a clear ordinance. And that really is an item for the next year at the latest.
Right.
So our power to impose impact fees is linked to a mandatory credit to those who make improvements that are above and beyond what would be required by the standards. So you can imagine a situation where someone who is paying impact fees agrees to a voluntary condition on their zoning case, and then that person comes back to request reimbursement from their impact fees that they are paying. By law, they are entitled to a credit. How much credit is not currently established by ordinance. I believe in practice, as far as I've been here, it's been dollar for dollar to the extent it is over the amount they would otherwise be required to do. Excuse me.
So we need to change that.
We need to adopt an ordinance to address the mayor's concern, which is currently it is a policy that is not as clear as it should be.
So
Yeah,
it needs to be
and for example, what's come up recently is this Fowler Road thing. Everybody talks to our folks. We don't have a policy to tell them how to do that. We don't have a policy to help them with the costs involved in that. They have to go through the process to find out if we're going to do that or not, basically. And in that particular case, it's on site, but, we try and put a 4-lane road through the property.
You would imagine an adopted ordinance that provides a credit against our transportation impact fees for transportation improvements that exceed what would otherwise be required under our standards.
And I
You could imagine that as
understand
the
Terry has a
ordinance.
policy like that. My understanding they do. They've been had it for years, and it's how to get the big roads in and stuff.
So maybe we should just take a look at that.
Yeah. I just been told recently about it, so.
Awesome. Steve with the complicated,
I
Steve
think-
with
I
the
think-
complicated
I think you bring
questions.
up a good point, Mr. Hill, and maybe
Yeah.
there is a way we can address that,
And just out of curiosity, the study would not be one of those plans that, okay.
Don't ask me.
Are you telling us that it would not be? Are you asking, should it incorporate
Yeah.
that?
Well, it may be a way to implement your plan.
Right, like how do we?
I'm saying, is there a way to tie this, if we, if there's a bunch of vacant land between two of the intersections, so we're kind of able to identify if this gets developed like this, they're really gonna trigger, whatever improvement it is. So is there a way to write that into the study and say, and then it becomes a plan essentially? If you come and develop in this quadrant or, wherever it is, you're gonna be partly responsible for whatever improvement is identified at that adjacent intersection.
So that would need to be done before you do your study, right? Are you asking?
I'm just wondering, does a study count as one of those adopted plans that
We-
he's talking about?
So we have that now. We have that now, both as to on-site improvements, where those who are developing, their frontage is improved half the width of the ultimate section of road improvements, for example. In addition, we require TIAs, and for areas that become substandard, those are going to be obligations upon that development entity to make those improvements.
Yeah, but I think, maybe sure I follow what you're saying, but I think what you're saying is, let's say I got a piece of property, 50 acres or so, and you determine that for a density of 3 or something, it may be adequate, but for a density of 6 or 7, you're saying it may trigger something that we need to improve on off-site. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, and would this study legally serve as an adopted plan to where if we identified certain sub-areas that we're talking about, rezoning, that would be kind of connected to whatever that improvement is that sufficient to tie a contribution requirement to that? I don't know how the legality works with collecting fees and stuff.
It sounds like it should be a part of our plan if we adopt it, because otherwise, what are we doing it for?
There are a number of challenges to the idea of identifying certain properties as being responsible for carrying the burden.
She said based on what would be developed. So if you had like a standard development, I think the mayor mentioned 3 units per acre.
Or-
But you went into 6 or 7 units per acre, that would trigger something additional. So if they looked at this and looked at the different kind of stages of development, why wouldn't that be a plan you could utilize?
I believe we would want to look at it because we know that there are certain constitutional principles that have been hanging out from the U.S. Supreme Court for a long time on government exactions upon development activity. And so any development activity needs to be proportional to the impact of that particular development and needs to be rationally connected both to their development. So the challenge is always, does the development that develops last have to pick up the pieces for those who did not? And the court has looked disfavorably upon that idea.
Well, if you come in and others have developed before you, you're coming into a different scenario than those that came before you. And I think our TIA is, the standards are very outdated.
Yeah.
What rates as a D or a C?
But I'm thinking,
We laugh all the time.
I think we tied, David, somehow back to comprehensive land use plan. It's not per lot, it's not somebody's 50 acres, but this area is pretty saturated, and you can't go no more than 2 or 3 units or whatever in a comprehensive land use plan. And if anything around that number, this board would be comfortable with. Anything above that board is going to probably take some kind of improvements or something. So I think comprehensive.
While I have probably exhausted how far I'm ready to go with sort of legal advice on this, I think a number of great points have been raised. An excellent one that I think has now come up in our last 2 presentations is that our zoning should match our comprehensive plan.
Correct.
And that should not happen as the developments come along. That should happen before they come along. Looking at a current map of Rollsville, one would believe that Rollsville's dream is to be mostly low-density residential. That's the way we are currently zoned. But that's not the vision, so that's a disconnect.
Now, I think we're currently, in the land use plan, is medium, right? But you're talking about zone.
I'm talking about the zoning. So the comprehensive plan is not the law. The law of Rollsville currently is we are a community that wants low-density residential. Over more than half of all of our square footage of our entire town.
So that's why we had the issues that come up when developers come before us wanting to change.
That's why. It's because our comprehensive plan doesn't match, and it's perhaps our vision doesn't match what our current zoning is.
So we have to go in and have a session about that and figure that out.
All right. Let's get back. You guys.
Well, at least they got to hear this discussion, so they know.
We're paying them by the hour, so let's get back and let's finish the presentation.
We're real close. So we've kind of shared with you what our process is going to be. And we're here today to kind of tell you how we're starting and get your input as we go down that path, and we'll be engaging with staff. But then we will create a document that summarizes all of this. And we'll do a draft version first, and that will go to the staff level, and staff will review and have that engagement. And then we'll have a final report that we can bring back to you. And the intent is that report will be an addendum to the transportation community plan. And so that's basically the process that we're going to go through. And we want to stay engaged with you all, hence today's starting this off as we get going, but kind of keep you informed. And we want to get your input too as we go through. So that's what today we're hoping to gather. And we've heard things already of that land use, and that's going to be a key piece that we will factor in to what we share with you at the end.
And I may have missed it when I stepped out. Was there a timeline for the reporting?
Yes, there is. Before school is out.
I think we're targeting end of July timeframe is what we're.
End of June before school, you said before school is out.
That was the other lady that said that.
Not all together.
I thought it was the other lady that said that.
Well, and you'll come back and explain the report to us, of course.
Yes, that'll be, it will explain what you have, and we can walk you through what we looked at, what we saw, and kind of give you that Reader's Digest of what it is.
I'm just really curious to see how all these developments that we've already said yes to, how that all plays out. Because
Impacts.
I think that was a question I asked Kelly before, I think, a couple of months ago, like, how do we know? You know, we keep hearing somebody's doing this and somebody's doing that and somebody else is gonna do something over here, like, what does this mean?
I'm sorry, I just need to clarify. End of June, end of July, I heard 2 dates.
Initially, it was end of June, but there were some delays, and so probably end of July at this
Gotcha.
point.
Okay.
Maybe beginning of August.
Gotcha.
Don't hold me to it.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a couple? I'm listening to this real time, so but I just haven't, they're really relevant to you all, I think, too. But just one question I had, I didn't see, so we're talking about a DOT road, right? What is DOT's role in this study with you?
Currently, we have not had any conversations with NCDOT, but we are happy to send them this study for review as well.
Do they review, do they accept? Because they're our review agency in our technical review committee, along with our TIA, right? And then they add and change things if they are so interested. So will they, I guess I think it's an important step that they get included and be a part of this because it is their highway, ultimately, I think. So I just didn't know if we intend to do that. I hope you are.
Yeah, we can include them in scoping conversations, and we can submit our study to them as well for review. We're happy to include them.
One thing you may not be aware of, and this is probably a good time for the board, and I wrote it down when we talked about the high school. So remember, board, I initiated some contact after the start of this year, school year, we had some accidents and such like that. We have had a working group on this subject, and DOT did bring in, you may be familiar with Kimberly Hinton. She is a DOT specialist for school. There's 2 of them in the whole state. We got Kimberly on this one. She has studied that area. She has come up with some recommendations, and she's going to present those to a working group, which includes school district, police department, planning, and other DOT staffers. And I want to make sure you get in the room for that meeting. It's going to be May 3rd, and Meredith, you have the details of that, so make sure you are included on that. And you can see what works. So some of what you're talking about may be part of what she's talking about too.
Yeah.
So I think that's important that you get caught up on that one. Mayor and Town Board, I have a request, and I think you all are aware of this. There's one piece I would like, and it's a scope, I don't know if it's a scope addition or not, but there's one proposed road in our CTP that I would like to spend a little time on as part of this, if we are so interested. And that is the road that comes off Main Street, across the street from Main Street Park, that goes through the Scarborough property, ultimately to the town campus, town site. And there is a road there, if you remember, you've seen kind of some preliminary work done with a Scarborough developer. I would like to know if that road is what it is, if it's needed or not, and if it is needed, what does it do to this study as a network, and also what we're doing with our campus. We've had a couple of conversations with potential developers of that property, and we all know that there's impacts to that neighborhood potentially. Entrances, what the size would be. So it's not necessarily in this corridor, but it's adjacent to it, it's an integral part of this. Is that something you all, board, would be interested in kind of just taking out? And is that possible in this study?
Would that be a cut-through road?
Well, I don't know. It's
It would
on
be,
the
right?
CTP.
So Scarborough is right here, south of that purple.
I can't see.
Is it Scarborough Road or is it a Scarborough?
No,
Road?
it's Scarborough Road.
It's, okay.
It's,
Oh, there's a way to.
is this
Can
the
you go to the
CTP? There you go. It's this stretch right here. This road right here. So that, or it might be this one too. So we just had Parker Ridge approved.
I think that's School Street there.
This is School Street, so
The
this
one
is the
that's
one,
solid.
this is
That's
the
the
one
one.
right here.
That collective
So we
street.
just had Parker Ridge approved, and we kind of minimize traffic out of Parker Ridge on a School Street. But this one is important. This one just got approved as a condition of development for Parker Ridge. But this is the piece I think deserves a little time. What we're gonna do with that one right there.
It's a road that's already there?
It is not there.
No, it's not there.
It connects to the road for
No, that's
Parker
the
Ridge.
one, that's the one, if you look at that drawing, they want to connect it to Prairie Street,
So
which
where the
puts all that
trailer
cut
was.
through.
We can talk about that
It's
further.
gonna
but-
be a nightmare.
That'd be a
That
nightmare.
way, yeah.
It seems like it's gonna be a nightmare to do that because you have that little development back there.
That's why I wanna get,
Gotcha.
I want to kind of get some issues resolved, whether it is or not, or what it does. Right now, our town campus plan, just so you know, our ADA consultants look at that as a CTP on our transportation plan. It shows that it comes through our parcel. And that's proper planning. It should be because it shows on the CTP. I don't know what it does, though, impact-wise at Main Street, what it does at Young Street, what's the movement, and then what it does for the future development and the neighborhood that exists next to it.
Yes, this would be a good time.
And so I would like to have that piece reviewed a little bit. And so that may be a little bit of additional scope on this, but if we'll talk to you about that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, we're showing Scarborough Street as north of.
It's not,
Main.
it's a Scarborough property, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's not
okay.
Scarborough Street.
Do you
It's-
know what
it's-
road it is?
No, it's not, it's unidentified.
What road you talking about?
The one that's going to go through Scarborough property, it does not have a name yet.
Okay.
No,
Yeah, but that,
It connects to Prairie Street though. Prairie Street is off of Main
Right.
Street.
yep, I see that. Okay.
It kind of connects, and that's gonna be a problem because it directs the traffic through Prairie neighborhood, and that's a very small streets in there.
So typically, when we want to include planned roads in the future, we want them to be reality, you know.
Right.
If there's a development coming on that we know about that's going to, you know, complete a section of a planned roadway, or if there's a funded project to complete it, that's definitely when we want to take a look at that kind of
Right.
connection. And we can, you know, we're not doing a full area-wide transportation network model. This is just a, you know, corridor model, but we can look at the traffic out there and do some rerouting and look at, you know, trips that will be generated and that sort of thing.
I'm considering adjacency and impactful to the corridor. So anyway, just, we'll talk further. But if you're interested, I'd like to get that one, I personally like to get a little bit of that resolved, just where we are. The
Has there been
third-
interest on,
What's that?
has there been interest on creating that
No,
street? Oh.
I just want to know how it impacts, well, I'd just like to know first, the neighborhood impacts, the town site impact, those type of things.
I'm sure the people who live over there would be interested to know.
Third one is just, I guess we talked about, the fourth one, is this discussion about not only intersection, but I think Paul was trying to get there with this, is the capacity of the existing road, right? So are you going to determine, so for instance, a comprehensive transportation plan acknowledged that the area north of Young and Main intersection for a stretch up to Granite Falls Boulevard is going to be difficult to add capacity, is a bottleneck, will be a future bottleneck. Will your study indicate and review what that should be? Or should it be widened? And if it should be, one of the things I would like to do, and this comes back to a board conversation we've had, is what road projects are we going to do? So there's developer road projects, right? but there's our road projects to make our system better. So for instance, that stretch feels like a good town project or DOT project potentially. If the road needs more capacity and there's very little right-of-way in there, if the constraints are extreme with the utilities and such like that, will you look at that capacity of those kind of pieces and say, this is a bottleneck and probably needs to be addressed, or how do you anticipate looking at those?
For clarification, where are you talking about?
So it's all that stretch from Granite Falls Boulevard, I call it south into Young and Main intersection. On Young.
Okay. I want to hear that, but then I have a question after that, since you're talking about.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, the preference is to stay within available right-of-way and, you know, not affect utilities and that sort of thing. And we will be looking at the constructability of each of those recommendations.
I know that in the community transportation plan, it identifies what the road widths, whether it's the 4-lane with a narrow median or 3-lane or with that turn lane there. You all recently updated your bike and greenway plan too. So that kind of, I think, built upon that roadway. So the community transportation focused on roadway needs. And so it shows a width. And I've kind of looked through what those widths are and then also integrated what the bike plan added. So adding a bike lane or adding a side trail, what that width. So looking at those two and looking at what's out there today, you have anywhere between 60 to 75 feet of right-of-way based on GIS information along this corridor is kind of what's existing out there. So based on what's been recommended to date, you're looking at going anywhere from up to like 89 or 90 feet and 66 feet. So right away, you talk about it,
Yeah,
there's a big delta, and that's just from the current recommendations for road infrastructure along this corridor. We will be adding potentially turn lanes or those other things which could increase that need, but we will look for what's constructible, everything has a reaction. You do something and it's a cost. So we will be looking to identify what's the most cost-effective, but still provide you with what you're trying to achieve from a traffic flow.
Right. And you know, these are the questions that decide whether we think they're a priority and use local funds, or we go to the STIP process and try and get in front of somebody and say, these are corridor improvements that need to be improved for however, if they qualify or not. So it feels like we really need to kind of barrel into those a little bit further, so we have that ability to start programming our funds by prioritization if they're needed, or seek other funding to do those. And that's what the comprehensive transportation plan doesn't do. It says, here's your plan, but I'm hoping that we can take this and say, here's your top 3 priority areas besides developer-driven, but other areas that system-wide, you are gonna have to address town or somebody, DOT, to make the system work better.
And I think we're focusing on those intersections. So going back to those 5 intersections,
Yeah.
that's really where we're looking at that concept design. What is that intersection's footprint? I think, I kind of hear you wanting to know more the bigger picture in between those intersections. What kind of constraints are there? Am I hearing that correctly?
Potentially, I think that's important. I mean, because you can't get to the intersection if you can't get there, right? I mean, I'm just being
Right.
facetious, but.
Yeah, no. And I think we can talk with Meredith kind of about that process. But we are limited a little bit in that I don't know that we're going to give you that full answer
Yeah.
that you're asking. From a traffic flow, we can tell you what's needed.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we're going to be going into that existing with, here's your proposed with, here's your delta of what you
Right.
are missing.
But you could gather enough information from this to take it that next level if we're interested, potentially.
That goes along with what I was asking, because I know that on another traffic study that we had done before, the area of transition from Averett to Young was an area that could be very problematic. That was stated before. So I'm interested to see what you come up with, but it sounds like you're not going to be addressing that.
Right now, that's just kind of outside of what we're tasked with doing. We are giving you a lot of that data, so it's going to be there and be accessible to convert to that more of a plan component. But right now, we have not taken it to that full plan, other than those intersections. You will have those intersections.
It's something that could definitely be added, though.
I think as you do this study at the end of it, it'd be good to say further recommendations or such. What can we do to expand on what your scope is here? And that could be one, I think, that you could bring to us to say this, to further enhance this.
Here's step A.
Right, so we understand.
Because the roadway will be enhanced from, let me get the streets right, Jones Dairy up, right? In front of that development.
Right.
So I could just see that driving more traffic into the funnel, which
Right.
could be is going to be problematic.
Exactly.
So I don't know why we wouldn't take that on now versus waiting, since we already know that development's already coming. It's already being
Let them
built.
think about this and see how it works in there. They may do it in our stage quickly, because I think they're set in their work program, and we may have to, we'll talk through with them and see how we can quickly transition into it. You know, and there's still questions I have, like, what's the benefit ultimately of building out Granite Falls Boulevard, right? I think there's a lot of benefit there, but we're not gonna get that out of this, but back
Right.
to that. Funneling, we all know the count is gonna be significant as it hits Granite Falls Boulevard going to, because everything goes through Young and Main.
Yep.
Typically, from, not everything, but East Wake Forest goes through that,
It's a funnel.
or Rogers Road to Raleigh, from somewhere mid Wake Forest, Heritage, definitely. And so it's going to clog our system. And
It already does.
right. And so what's the benefit? So after this study, I think then what are the extra benefits we want to look at that we can do, like Granite Falls Road extension? What is that? Is that a benefit and relief of what factor to this corridor? What is widening this corridor? A relief of what factor potentially? So we can start building our case, how you want to program funds or go after seek other funds to build out the network a little bit further of existing roads.
Well, first you gotta get the extension in there. before we move.
Right.
It would be good to have the traffic draft, kind of draft away from middle of town. And I think that's the only way to get it from where we talking about on Haver Road is to go down Granite Falls Boulevard.
It's a key part, I still think.
I think so. I think that was kind of the vision of this whole plan to start with.
Right.
20 years ago was Granite Falls Boulevard. And I think it could be a truck route too, to keep trucks from coming through the middle of town.
What, Granite Falls Boulevard?
It's finished.
Hmm?
It's finished.
It don't go nowhere now.
It don't go anywhere now.
Mm-hmm. I
Anyway,
was just
those are
thinking
the-
about that.
Those are things, when staff meets, I'll continue talking to them, but we may bring more recommendations from this to further enhance this study. So,
You all have been given a whole lot of stuff to package up very, very nicely for us.
It's so funny because I see the looks on their faces, we're like,
What?
this is more than a 5-minute task.
No, but the other thing is too, so like, I estimate and stuff, and I'm like, we need to give them when you're estimating something, you want to know your end product beforehand. So if you're going to have more information and break it down, you need to know the end result beforehand. You don't want to like have them go through the whole thing, and then we come back and say, well, can you add this or can you add that? And it's like, I want to make sure if we're going to go somewhere with it, we might want to go there and tell them in
I
advance.
think so. So
Make sure
you
they
just
know.
heard where I'm kind of
Yeah,
throwing
yeah.
out my vision, and
Right.
if it matches with yours, they'll be able to focus, continue. I think what you gather, and we'll allow that, Paul.
Right,
But
okay,
we probably don't have the money for it, nor the scope right now.
right. But I just don't want them to spend time on it and then have to, and then redo the whole thing again.
That's
It's just,
right,
yeah,
I understand.
I just want to see that
Yeah.
But
traffic
it sounds
study.
like this is step one, and this is what we're going to get. And then we'll build on it
Right.
after they bring back to us what we have, that they have.
It should be buildable.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a headache and a half. Where'd that come
All
from?
right, thank you.
So are there any other problem areas that you all want to bring up? Are there any citizen concerns that you've heard over and over again about a particular intersection or, anything else that we should know now?
Let us think about it and get back to you. Oh, my gosh, but the area that you mentioned, I haven't heard anything except what was discussed today.
I think
So,
the
we're good.
one that gets the most attention, is probably one that Paul mentioned
Yeah.
at Jones,
Yep.
Jones Dairy intersection.
I live on Jones Dairy Road.
In
so
the
I'm
high
very
school
familiar
is the
with
other
that.
one. In the high school.
We're doing that one. That's
Yeah,
included.
but it's already on the study though.
But please definitely find out about Quarry Road because it used to be a nightmare over there. Everyone was trying to beat the
Hopefully that
traffic.
warrants a stoplight.
Either they're turning into that area or they're coming out of it trying to beat the buses.
And I believe that.
I know the DOT review is going to have some recommendations, school districts participate in that. And also, don't forget, you asked for, are getting a signal at Quarry Road as part of Point North. And that's,
Right, and that's
yeah,
good
and
because
that is on the schedule for the next year, I believe, so.
yeah, because I remember that request being made because that development's going to be huge.
Right.
And I can just see those kids. And again, I don't know if they come out that way. I think Ronnie said they do not.
What's that?
They're
They
not allowed to
don't.
go back there anymore.
That's good because it was awful coming out of Quarry
No, but
Road.
I think the principal's gonna look at putting some, because really they call it the driveway is getting bad here. And the fix for the driveway is more stacking.
Well, and that's what Kimberly is likely going to be addressing.
And she has expressed loudly, why aren't that back area connected?
Yeah.
Why isn't there better flow?
Right.
And I think she's going to say that. And then your next job will be to talk to Wake County School District and ask that question so that we can see if there's truly improvements that allow that, we ought to go to the school district.
Are you
and
talking
say,
about where the buses are?
all that, yeah,
No, it's just
In the
that
back.
collection.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not connected,
Because most high schools have that connected, it's just gated off.
yeah.
But ours is all like separated for some
There
reason.
was
They
a
can
reason
put an
behind it. I
old
can't
loop in
remember what
there
it was.
somehow.
And I'd be curious how she foresees the signal, if that's going to impact her recommendations for circulation.
Yeah, I think what I heard preliminarily, she's going to advise everything, a lot of traffic should go through a signal.
Yeah, the signal helps by, you got people turning right in there and left in there, and they both jog thing. The signal would help, get them off the road quicker, for sure.
Yep.
And break it up.
Yep.
It won't help the people trying to get through, but it helps the people trying to get them off the road.
Did you
Great
have
starting
anything
point.
that you already addressed that?
I thank y'all so much for all this information that you presented to us and all the information you're going to present to us. I would not want to be on the other side trying to figure it out. So thank you.
I have a quick question. I don't know if I need to come off, just a quick question. Just any considerations to the Main Street and Young Street, basically the town center parking as Cobblestone gets ready to come online? I don't know if that's an option or something to add or something to consider. And parking, is it just on-street parking or angled parking? I don't even know if that's an option too as well. How will that impact traffic going through the area, Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, weekend? So just a thought.
Yeah, that's not something we thought about in terms of what the cross-sections look like now. Are there plans with the cobblestone?
We don't know.
Yeah, there are. We have the approved site plan.
Okay.
And there is on-street parking
Okay.
associated with that.
Okay.
I know one time the parking was supposed to be angled parking, but then that was taken away, correct?
It's parallel on the Cobblestone side, angle on Suzanne's.
Oh, so it is still angled on that side?
Yes.
Okay, I thought it was changed there as well. All right.
Is that it?
Thank you.
All right.
Good
Thank
job.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Meredith, any closing comments?
She's gonna say no.
So now I have to come up with something. No, I'm pleased to have Exalt here, and it's exciting to work with a new firm who we haven't worked with before. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, board, that gets us to the end of the work session. I will ask our other panel here, committee, any closing thoughts, questions from you guys?
I don't think so. I think they'll just be excited to see this transportation plan or report once it's, to see how, all the existing subdivisions and proposed improvements will be affecting the traffic.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you for the work you guys do. I work pretty hard, so thank you for that.
Dude, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
How about the board? Anything closing for the board? I will say at the
Let's get
mayor's
started.
meeting last night, Wake County did come in and do a presentation on affordable housing. We need that presentation, I think, and some of it came out in the newspaper today, some exciting pieces, but the Wake County board voted yesterday, and they voted to spend a big sum of money for affordable housing. So what they're asking us to do, unless it's change of plan, Kelly, is they want a small group that doesn't violate quorum to come and meet with first and kind of get a barometer check, more or less, and then they will schedule come presentation for the whole board. So in saying that, I think the two biggest advocates I've heard, for affordable housing is Sheila and Michelle. So if you guys are willing to participate in this little meeting with Wake County.
Definitely.
When is it? Is
We
it
have
scheduled or
scheduled-
no
we have
schedule?
not
Not
scheduled
scheduled.
And I did receive this PowerPoint you received last night. I'll send it on and also send you on what they approved in their commissioner meeting yesterday. Includes that Roseville site.
So if you would, work with them and try to get this, because they want to do that little meeting first, and see if you can work with these two in getting a date that they can commit to. If they can't, then we'll have to kind of drop back in line, but,
Are you done? That's it? I do have a question. When you're done.
yeah.
I just want to know, for the parking at the park on Redford Place, are people supposed to be parking on the grass? Like next to the fence? There was like a whole line of traffic parked not halfway on the grass and on the sidewalk, but literally on the grass up close to the fence. So is that recommended?
Was their parking lot full?
No.
I'm unaware of what you're talking about, but no, if there's parking, it's supposed to be in parking spaces. I don't,
It's not the first time that I've seen it, but last night it was really a lot of cars parked.
during a game.
It was during the game, but I think the game was over. But there were a lot of cars parked. You know where I'm referring to? When you're going down Redford, left side, that whole side right there, full of cars. So I don't know if it was a better view, somebody didn't want to get out of the car.
So in that private field behind the ball fields.
Say it again?
Is it the private field behind the ball fields?
If the concession stand it's to the right of the concession stand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh. I
It's
am
new
unaware.
overflow parking.
Yeah, I don't,
Would think, because when they come off of that, out of the grass, they're going onto the sidewalk. They're not even going on this part of the sidewalk.
okay.
They're going over the drop. And I think that's pretty dangerous, especially as late as it was last
Good
night.
observation. I've not heard about this yet, this condition, so. I don't believe they should, that's private property. If they're getting on, also, I believe. So.
That's all I
follow
want
up.
to know.
Yeah, the only thing I will mention, I know Kelly probably don't want to say too much about it. We dealt with it for about 8-9 days.
Ron,
We
is
did
this
have
your
a-
garbage?
We did have an incident on North Main, and I would say get with him, get an update on kind of if you're interested on that how it went. I would like to think everybody knew what went on. Because I don't think it's over. I think some people are going to come to the public hearing in May and talk about, to make sure it doesn't happen again, basically.
On North Main? So what, are we going to have individual conversations about it? That's all you're
Y'all
saying?
just ask me and I can bring you up to speed if you want to know. probably good to know a little bit before we have people come.
Okay.
Kelly's like, I'm gonna get you, Ronnie. I'm gonna get you, Mayor.
Well, I have to say, Kelly, Meredith, and the staff, they did a great job of responding, trying to figure it out. So did Dave, too. Dave got pulled into making sure everybody was dotting the i's, crossing the t's on land use and all that kind of stuff. Appreciate all the effort the staff put in on it. So thank you.
Haven't seen any creatures lately when I'm walking, at least on our side.
Creatures such as?
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
The vultures.
okay. I
They
thought you
look
meant
like
snakes.
creatures to me.
We had an Easter report.
We had a what?
We had a report from a
You had a
citizen
report
about
in
an
it.
Easter.
Haven't seen
sighting.
any on our side, though.
Yeah, but
They
it
went
seems
back.
like they have been, they're not as engaged right now as they were.
Are we talking about the
The
ones that fly?
vultures.
The vultures.
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
big- the
we
big
probably
ones.
need to make sure we don't stay on top of it.
Yep.
You
They
know,
don't
it's
multiply.
better to prevent them from coming than to try to
They're
get
probably
'em
coming
out.
back.
Captain Hayes is doing a really good
Where
job.
I've been
doing it.
seeing them lately,
Yeah.
just going down the highway, is all the way down here to the gay property where we're talking about when you're coming into town, they hanging out down there, right on the edge of
Mm.
town right now. A lot of them are down there.
Wow. They really migrated because they used to be over in what is that development we went to, when they had the,
Cedar Lake,
no, down West Young Street.
West Young Street.
Uh-huh, when you go down, what is that
Shannon
development?
Bridge,
On the left side. Anyway, they were hanging out in the trees. This was when Frank was alive. They were it was so many of them in the trees, and those trees are now gone, so
Can we adjourn?
they're moving into town.
Yeah, let's try this. And Captain really did a great job last time in trying to, probably the best expert we got on. So.
He was out there chasing them.
Thank you for whatever you did.
He was chasing them and caging them. He
Good
wasn't,
job
I'm
on
kidding.
that. And also, make sure we got the permits we need beforehand, because it takes a long time to get them. But anything, thanks for bringing that up, whoever brought it up. Anything else from anyone? All right. Well, I will, unless I hear an objection, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. So thanks, everybody.
So moved in first and second.